tell you about your history. So as you do that, you pull it up. And if you're of African descent, it's telling you, since you trust their science, but it is telling you that your descendants is from somewhere in Africa. Your report is not telling you that you've been in the Americas for thousands of years. So we really should stop with that nonsense. But we respect the true indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. And we acknowledge that they are engaged in a continuous fight to regain control of these lands, from Alaska all the way down to Chile, and everything in between is the land of the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. And so we respect and honor them, and we stand shoulder to shoulder with them in their fight to regain control of these lands that rightfully belong to them. And of course, we honor and respect our African ancestors, the people who are the only reason why we are here today. Stop talking about this nonsense about I'm not my ancestors. Well, who the hell are you if you aren't your ancestors? If you have any spirit of resistance, you only have that because of your ancestors who are forever resistant. You know, I watched this movie last night. We watched this movie. I don't like Tyler Perry, but my partner wanted to see this movie about these Africans in the 30s that he just came out with. And it was the best movie I've seen from him, which isn't saying a whole lot. But one of the things that was in the movie that they did portray is that when the Europeans, practiced racism against our people, was the practice, and still is today. In the 1930s, our people immediately went to get their weapons, their guns, to defend themselves. And even that silly movie had that in there. But the point of that is that we always defended ourselves, There's never, the overwhelming majority of African people in this backward country descend from somewhere within the southern part of this country because of the transatlantic slave trade. And so y'all know you got people in the South, they have guns. That's just how that goes. So this nonsense about we just always turn the other cheek and people could defecate on us and spit on us and beat the what out of us and we never did anything. That's a narrative that's provided by our enemies. From the eastern shores of Africa, all the way through the Middle Passage, all the way through the Americas, we have resisted these thugs and criminals every step of the way. From 530 years ago to today, we continue to resist them. And so let's just operate on that tip and move forward with that, because that is the truth. And so we're thankful that you're here with us today to talk about socialism, something that everybody has an opinion on and virtually no one has done any study on and has any concrete knowledge on. So, it's the equivalent. Talking to somebody about socialism in this society is like me sitting here arguing with women and marginalized gender folks who have delivered babies, and I'm arguing with them about what childbirth looks like. If I did that with any of you who have delivered babies, you would look at me and talk to me like I was an absolute fool, and you would have every right to do so, because I would be an absolute fool for talking to you about something I have no intellectual background with, and certainly no physical experience with. Well, that's the same thing with socialism. If you have not studied it, if you have not participated in it and have a clear understanding of what it is, you don't know what it is. I don't care how smart you think you are, you don't know what it is. So I appreciate people coming here today. Hopefully this is helpful, what we're going to do in the next 60 minutes. And you can share this with people when people start talking about, socialism being giving out free things to people. Well, what a bunch of idiotic nonsense that is. So that's why we're here, to dismantle that nonsense and give people some real information to work with about what socialism is. And so we want to start, as we always do, with our brief introductions. Our Ancestors' Voices. This program is sponsored every Sunday by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the AAPRP. And the AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass, Pan-African political party that is based in Africa. We're not based in New York or Chicago or LA. We are based in Africa, the national homeland of all 2 billion people of African descent, scattered and suffering in over 120 countries on the planet Earth today. That is who we are. And our objective is achieving Pan-Africanism, which we describe correctly as one unified socialist Africa, one unified socialist Africa. So in other words, what we're saying is that this objective, we believe, once achieved, will bring about the fulfillment and the aspirations of African people everywhere on earth, as Kwame Nkrumah said in the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare that you see there on the screen. And if you want to understand our strategy and the work that we're engaged in the APRP to bring about Pan-Africanism, there are many logos there on the screen. They represent revolutionary Pan-African forces on the ground throughout the African continent that we have strong developing relationships with in order to create one united worldwide fighting force of revolutionary Pan-Africanists fighting for one unified socialist Africa. And one clear example of our work, you see the QR screen on the code on the screen, I'm sorry, the QR code on the screen. See, English is not our language. It's the colonial slave masters' language. So I don't have any problems with messing up English words. I feel like when I mess up speaking English, that's the ancestors pushing inside of me to fight back against the oppression that violently forced the language down on us in the first place. So if that's a problem for you, maybe that's because you just don't have that type of analysis of history. And if you don't, that's good that you're here, because we will definitely help you change that. So the QR code you see on the screen is a code that represents one of our many programs we have throughout the APRP. In Burkina Faso in West Africa, the country right above Ghana in the Gulf of Guinea in West Africa, we have young organizers on the ground in the APRP who are working through the Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity. The Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity. And that is an educational center. If you know anything about Africa, if you've been there and you studied it, you know anything about it, you know education there is 100% controlled by slave masters and colonists, even today in 2022. Even today in 2022, when I go to Africa, which I have done often, you go to the schools, the books on the shelves are C. Dick run, Huck Finn, and all of that colonizing nonsense. And of course, the reason for that is the people who have the capacity and resources to bring books to Africa are primarily the people in the colonial religious institutions, the churches, the church systems, all of these backward, reactionary, capitalist-dominated churches that pose as spiritual worship today in the capitalist world, then they're the ones who take books over there. So that's why those books are the books that are there. So what these African revolutionaries are attempting to do with this Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity, Thomas Sankara Center in Burkina Faso, is bring in revolutionary books and create a revolutionary ideological training process for our people on the ground in Burkina Faso. And of course, we do that work all throughout the African continent, but we're highlighting this particular project right now. So we ask you to support it. Scan your smartphone or so-called smartphone on the QR code and get the information about how to become a regular donor to the Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity in Burkina Faso. $5 a month, $10 a month, $100 a month, whatever you can do, please do it. And please do it now. Don't say, well, I'll get to that later, and knowing you ain't gonna never get to it. Please do it now and support revolutionary, independent, Pan-African work. If you don't do it, no one else is going to do it. The Rockefellers are not going to do it. The DuPonts, the Kellogg's, the JP Morgans are not going to support Pan-African revolutionary work. The Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys are not going to do that for us. The Democratic and Republican Party, the Labor Party in Britain, the Zionist parties in Zionist Israel, none of these people are going to support revolutionary Pan-African work. The only people who are going to support that are African people. And so if we don't support it, it's not going to be supported. And if it's not supported, we are forced to face the reality of continuing to live in this suffering and squalor that has sabotaged our lives for 530 years. I don't know about you, but I want to change that. So let's do the work and support the work that's going on to make that happen. So please support the Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity. And just continuing on, Our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is outlined in Nkrumah's handbook. You see on the page there. Check that book out if you want to know what the AAPRP is about and the work we're actually doing. Not the work we're talking about doing, not the work we hope to do, not the work that we want to convince you is going on, but the work that is going on, that I myself have participated in all over the African world, all over the African continent. So if you want to understand that, read Nkrumah's handbook. And this program is hosted every week by myself, Ajamu Umi, and my daughter, Shakura Umi, both of us active organizers within the AAPRP. And I know Shakura is on the road traveling. She's somewhere in Ku Klux Klan County right now in Mississippi. So she may lose her internet connection. And if she does, we'll continue on. But I'm hoping that she's fine and she's there and she's able to participate. And so we will find out, because we're going to start, as we always do, by turning it over to her right now. So Shakura, if you were there, let us hear you.
Thank you so much. Yes, hopefully I'm coming in okay. Yes, Daddy?
Yes, you are. Yes.
All right, awesome. Okay. So the very system we all operate under every day was concocted through theft, murder, and exploitation. There are clear methods to verify that the entities with wealth in this society have had that wealth because of exploitation, while there is equal evidence that those who lack wealth do so because of the structuring of this system. The taking down of racist symbols, statues, etc., if nothing else, reveals the depth to which the entire foundation of this system is based on standing on the backs of African, indigenous, and other colonized people. These facts are irrefutable. Nothing in this system has resulted from any sincere vision, hard work, or predetermined blessings from God. It's all the result of violence, terrorism, and brutality. Example, Firestone Tire Company benefits directly from the exploitation of Africa. Today, Firestone is in its 96th year of 100-year contract with the West African government of Liberia to exploit Liberia's rubber plantations. The so-called relationship developed in 1924 when the US pressured Liberia to cease developing an economic partnership with Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association by promising the neo-colonial government of Liberia that if they shut down talks with Garvey, the US would prevent France from invading Liberia to colonize their rubber. Also, when the US Central Intelligence Agency overthrew Kwame Nkrumah's government in Ghana in February 1966, the neo-colonial puppets who replaced Nkrumah immediately closed the country's socialist tire factory, which produced 100,000 tires per year, and sold the factory to Firestone. Firestone never operated the factory, but kept it closed to ensure no continued competition would exist against it. Next slide, please. So today, 80% of cobalt reserves used to power all devices that give or receive a signal come from Congo and Mozambique. Just as I just said, the same reason that you all are listening right now and that I am able to speak is because we are all on some type of device that uses power, and that power is generated from cobalt. This industry is 100% controlled by corporations like, you guessed it, Samsung, Apple, etc., who rely on the brutal exploitation of mining workers in Central Africa. 75% of all chocolate products in the Western Hemisphere come from cacao from Ghana. 60% of all diamonds in the West come from the Congo, Zimbabwe, Azania, colonized as South Africa, and 40% of those diamonds are polished by the illegal settler Zionist state of Israel. 65% of all aluminum products come from Guinea, named the bauxite, and shale oil receives almost 40% of their annual revenues from exploitive oil refining practices in the Niger Delta region of Nigeria. So again, you all, We know all the numbers in terms of how Africa is being exploited, but I just want to repeat some so that they can stand out to us. If you read any of Kwame Nkrumah's books, then you remember him talking specifically in the book called Ghana, where he talked about Ghana reaching its independence and him becoming the first president. He talked about working with the cacao farmers. And so I just mentioned that 75% of those resources are coming from products from cacao in Ghana. And so just thinking about what that means to exploit that. So the next time you go into the grocery store and you see a chocolate bar, I need you to understand that at least 75% of those cacao resources are not only being exploited from the continent, but being distributed and used to make the same products that you and I can pass in the grocery store when we're in Walmart or Target or what have you. 60% of all diamonds that are sold in the West come from the Congo, Zimbabwe, Azania. And we don't even have to think about how dangerous those situations are when people are in the mines looking for diamonds. We don't have to think about the respiratory issues that Africans develop later. You don't have to think about asthma and poor lung capacity and other things like that from Africans digging and not making a living wage off of the work that they're doing. All we need to think about is that 60% of those diamonds are coming from the Congo, Zimbabwe, and Azania, and 40% of that 60 are being polished, and you guessed it, imperialist Zionist Israel. And so just thinking about that and understanding that all of the resources that we can say we produce as Africans, we don't control them. And so today's seminar is all about socialism, just to help you get a better idea of what would happen if Africa was under the control of African people. What would happen in terms of the resources that are being produced from there? And what would happen for the people in terms of the kind of respect that we would start to get all around the world, because we would have control of our land again. If you have not already donated to the Thomas Sankara Center, you need to scan the QR code when you see it on the slide. And at this point, if you have not joined an organization that is working for justice, it should be your mission to do so before the end of this year, because we continue to be under attack. Indigenous people continue to be under attack. Palestinian people continue to be under attack. Asian descent people continue to be under attack. Homophobia is alive and well. Transphobia is alive and well. Patriarchy is alive and well. And if you are not in an organization that is working for justice, it's going to be that much harder for you to resist those systems of oppression. However, if you join an organization that is working for justice, then you're going to be collectivizing your efforts with other people who are like-minded and who also want to terminate those systems of oppression. And then you'll be strong enough as a collective unit to be able to do so. Join an organization that is working for justice. Ashe.
Ashe, Shakura, and thank you for that. And I hope that you all are safe. Please be safe in your travels through there. Watch out for the Klan, the Proud Boys, and all them, and the people that sponsor them, all the police departments. Watch out for all of those people and get back safely. And of course, you will let me know when you do so, and I'll be waiting impatiently to hear from that. And so just want to, before we jump into socialist development, just want to talk and just kind of summarize what Shakur talked about, particularly for African people. And when we say African people, we're talking about all people of African descent are African people and belong to the African nation. What she just laid out in those few minutes is the exact reason why we're in the situation that we're in, because capitalism and imperialism is 100% dependent upon exploiting Africa's wealth for their own enrichment and continued power over the planet. So they have to continue to maintain their system by engaging in the practices she just mentioned. And so this is the reason why we're not respected. And it's important that we understand that there's no such thing as anti-Blackness. These people do everything they can to get as Black as they possibly can. There's no such thing as that. The problem is anti-Africanness. That's the problem. The problem is anti-Africa, because the minute that we wake up and understand that we are Africans and we are a part of the fight to liberate Africa, and understand that all of these immense African resources that Shakura just gave you a clear perspective of how they're controlled and who they benefit, which is not us right now. The minute we wake up and realize that and join the fight to change that, all these problems we have now are over overnight. You think that when we control our oil, that the world needs, when we control our rubber that the world needs, the diamonds, the gold that the world needs, the cocoa for chocolate that the world needs, the coltan, the columbite tantalite that you couldn't even communicate with me right now. There would be no internet if it were not for that. You think when we control the zinc and the metal that cars are built out of, that all of these things that African people control, you think we'll have to worry about being shot down in the street by Gestapo police? That will cease overnight when we were able to tell people that if our people continue to be brutalized, you can kiss goodbye your ability to drive a car. Well, we can drive electric cars if you don't sell us gasoline. Well, guess what? The resources you need for that are in Africa too. The batteries in the Teslas don't work unless you're able to get the lithium that is controlled by our mother, Africa. That is not controlled, but is produced by our mother, Africa. So the minute we understand that, you all, then we won't be sitting here begging disgracefully to these people for a job when we have all the capacity to provide everything our people need and that all oppressed people need. And the system that will enable us to do that is socialist construction. And that's why we're talking about that today. But again, please support one of our projects on the ground in Africa. We have many. If you have something against Burkina Faso, we can point you to Zimbabwe. We can point you to Azania, what you call South Africa, the colonial name. We can connect you to Kenya. We can connect you to Ghana, to Gambia, to Sierra Leone. We can connect you to Nigeria. We can connect you all over the African continent, to Senegal, to Guinea, anywhere you want to contribute if you got something against Burkina Faso. But right now, we're focusing on the Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity in Burkina Faso. And we strongly encourage you to scan the QR code on the screen. And if you don't have a phone that can do that, the URL is there on the screen as well. And please just sign up to become a donor. $5 a month, $10, $50, $100, whatever you can do. Support our on-the-ground work to liberate the African continent. Because when that happens, Africans all over the world will taste freedom for the first time in 500 plus years. So let's talk about how that will look when we talk about one unified socialist Africa. What are we talking about? We can't be talking about doing that under a capitalist system, because capitalism is the reason why we're in the situation we're in today. A system where all of the means of production are owned and controlled by multinational corporations for the purpose of profit. That is a system that was built, built and is maintained from seed money supplied by the transatlantic slave trade. It was that money that came from our ancestors picking cotton, sugarcane, hemp, tobacco, all of those things that was sent to Europe and created the banking industry, created the insurance industry, created the capitalist system, fueled and financed the industrialization period. So our oppression fueled and developed capitalism. So you have to be a fool if you think I'm gonna sit here in 2022 and let you tell me that the road to our success is some sort of capitalist solution disguised as something else, where entrepreneurship is going to do it for us. Entrepreneurship is going to create wealth in our communities. That's just another way of saying buy into the capitalist concept. Some of us are not confused by that. So we are saying that none of those things are going to liberate the masses of our people. They're only going to keep us in servitude. The only thing that's going to do it is socialist construction. And socialist construction, we know we have to talk about it. That's why we're talking about it today, because we know everybody's been propagandized against socialism. Of course, capitalism is going to propagandize you against socialism. Of course, they're going to want you to think that socialism is evil, even though you haven't read one sentence in one book about it, haven't traveled to one genuinely socialist country. Still, they want you to believe that you know everything you need to know to understand that socialism is not for you. Because if they can bamboozle you into thinking that way, then you will never want to pursue a system that will truly bring us to the point in history that we need to be in to provide an opportunity for people to truly be free. So that's what we're going to talk about. So the first thing when we talk about socialist development, we're saying it requires a revolutionary process that involves millions of people engaged, working, and fighting together. Socialism requires that. That what I just said and what you see on the screen, if you're looking at it, is the definition, you all, of revolution. Revolution is not 5 or 6 people like you see in the movies. It's not adventurism. It's not going out because you're mad because somebody disrespected you, and so you're going to go out with guns. That's not revolution. That's just you being mad and politically unsophisticated and immature. That's what that is. Revolution requires intensive work with millions of people to transform society. That's what revolution means, a complete transformation of society. That's what it means. And in order to have a complete transformation of society, you cannot keep the same political economic system in place, then you don't have a complete transformation of society. That's why people are confused. I remember in 2010 or 11, you had what they call Arab Spring, right? Remember that? The uprisings in North Africa and the Arab world, and in countries like Egypt and Morocco and Tunisia. And people were calling these revolutions. And I was telling people, those aren't revolutions. It's not that. Those are just uprisings. A lot of them supported by Western capitalism and imperialism. They're not even real. They're not even coming from the people. A lot of them. So that's not a revolution. A revolution has to transform the society that is oppressing the people into something different. So you cannot have a revolution in a capitalist country, and when it's over, you still have a capitalist country. That's not a revolution, you all. That's not what that is. That's you being fooled into thinking that things are changing. A revolution has to change the system. And that's why socialism can only come through a revolutionary process. It's required in order for you to build socialism. And that revolutionary process must be guided at all times, by a political education process, meaning that all these millions of people have to be engaged in constant education that never ceases, never stops. You never graduate. You're constantly engaged in political education, because the whole point is that you're building a system that can change the course of history on the planet Earth. And since everything changes all the time, how can your education around those variables stop? It has to continue, because the forces of nature always continue. So political education is constant, and it's designed to engage in a process where you're participating in it with the people that you're building the society in with, and that you have a criticism, self-criticism process, and you have democratic centralism, and you have all of these tools in place to ensure that we're holding each other accountable, and that we're pushing each other to be, as the Kwame Nkrumah said, the best human beings that we can possibly be. That's a revolutionary process. That's why people who are seriously engaged in revolutions, they don't say, the capitalists say, well, Cuba had a revolution in 1959. They say that. You'll never hear the Cubans say that. They'll tell you right now, 2022, we're engaged in a revolutionary process. The beginning of it was the 50s. That wasn't the beginning and the end. It's still engaged, because socialism itself is a revolutionary process. It's a process that exists to provide a transformation from capitalism to communism. I know people like never heard any of this before, because nobody gets an education about this stuff in this backward country, but that's what we're here to do. So socialism, by definition, is a transition system, and that makes it a system of revolutionary process. That's what it is. And that has to be guided by political education at all times. So when you have a society like this, where 95% of people aren't involved in any real education process, and I'm not talking about going to these bourgeois institutions and getting these degrees. That's not a real education. That's training. That's capitalist training, so that you can get out, get your receipt, which is the degree, and you can go work for the capitalist system and dedicate your whole life for building wealth for the capitalist system. That has to be what it is, because 99% of the people who go through that process, that's all they do. They don't do anything else. They don't do anything to combat the system that's oppressing us. They don't even know what's happening in the world. People got PhDs, master's degrees, and don't know a damn thing about what's happening in the world. So you cannot call that by itself in education. And I'm qualified to speak on that, because I'm a rebellious slave that got a master's degree through the bourgeois education systems. And the only reason why I did that is because I know the training in this society. And so when I tell people, yeah, I have a master's degree, they automatically think, oh, he knows what he's talking about. I might not know a damn thing. But that's how people are conditioned to think in this society. That's the only reason why I got it. But I can tell you right now, that so-called master's degree I got from the university system compared to the political education process that I just described to you that I've been engaged in the All-African People's Revolutionary Party for the last 38 years, there is no comparison. In fact, the political education process of the APRP made my evolution through that backward bourgeois system so easy. So easy. I dominated that system. It was so easy because of the discipline that I learned in the party process. So you cannot ever convince me, well, I have an education because I went to MIT. No, you just a well-trained slave. That's what you are with that. That's all that does for you. If you don't have anything competing against that, the backward values you get from that, all you can ever be is a well-trained slave. That's all you can be. You can get that and you should get that, but you have to supplement it and couch it rather in a real revolutionary political education process. That's required, you all. And common ideology drives this revolutionary process. That has to be what exists in the revolutionary process, a common ideology. Now, does that mean, what is ideology? Ideology are the ideas that you believe in that guide your actions. That's what an ideology is. And so ideology is not a negative thing. I hear people say, we're so backward here. People say, well, I don't have an ideology. Only a fool makes a statement like that. Everything is ideological. When I lived in Ghana, the 80-something-year-old woman that I stayed with, she told me when I was still a young man, she told me, boy, everything is about ideology. Even when you use the bathroom, there's an ideology behind that. And she was absolutely correct when she told me that. And everything has an ideology. You may be so ignorant you don't know what ideology you operate on, but I can tell you, if you're sitting here today saying, well, I don't have an ideology, you're operating under capitalist ideology. That's what you're doing, because that's a part of what capitalist ideology does, is condition people to think that they don't have an ideology, so that they don't understand that they're doing the will of the master when they do what they do. So this is what we have to break, you all. So a common ideology, and that does not mean, please don't leave here with nonsense. That does not mean that anybody's saying, well, everybody has to think alike. I mean, if you listen to this program, in any of the APRP programs, you know that we are independent thinking people. Nobody can dispute that. Nobody can. We're way more independent thinking people than the people who accuse us of not being that. No question about that. That's not even refutable. So that's not let's talk like adults. Let's not be ignorant children that don't know anything. We're not talking about everybody's thinking the same way. We're talking about common concepts that we all, if we're thinking in our right mind, should agree on. Like, everybody deserves food, shelter, and clothing. Everybody deserves a right to a quality education. Everybody deserves health care. If you're a person who parents children, you deserve childcare. These are things that we believe should be commonly believed, and that's a part of a common ideology, an ideology that builds and maintains a system that ensures people have all those things. That's what we mean when we say common ideology. It's important. In the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, we have a common ideology. It's called Nkrumahism Touréism, and it takes its name after the people that supplied the groundwork for the ideas that we're fighting to bring into practical reality. Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Touré. So we call it Nkrumahism Touréism. You can call your ideology whatever you want to, but you have one, whether you acknowledge or not is immaterial. You have an ideology, and hopefully your ideology is a people's ideology, as Sekou Touré would say, people's class ideology. Hopefully that's what your ideology is, but you definitely have one. No force on earth that lives and breathes doesn't have one. And so that education has to advance the notion that socialism defined is a system where the means of production, the water, the air, the food, the resources, everything we need to live, survive, and develop as human beings and this planet is control by the masses of people for collective benefit. That is the definition of socialism. The means of production controlled by the masses for collective benefit. Anyone that tells you different doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. And if you don't have the courage to tell them that, please send them to us and we'll tell them that. They don't know what they're talking about. Even Karl Marx, and we're not Marxist-Leninists. I just told you our ideology is Nkrumahism, Touréism, because we believe that ideology comes from your culture, and we're African people. We have nothing against Karl Marx. We think he's wonderful. We think he provides outstanding analysis for European people in Europe and people of European descent. And we have ours, our culture. And many aspects of socialism are universal, regardless of culture. We'll talk about that. But he talked about in the Communist Manifesto, he talked about how the definition of socialism being what I said, the means of production owned and controlled by the masses of people for collective benefit, as opposed to capitalism defined as the means of production owned by multinational corporations for private profit. Those are the definitions that we're working with today. And again, I mentioned democratic centralism is the organizing component utilized in socialist development to ensure democracy. And don't come telling us, well, democratic centralism ain't good, and you haven't studied, you don't know what it is. You just heard some idiot tell you about, come on. I've spent the last 38 years participating in an organization that practices democratic centralism. And what that means is I've spent too many nights till 2 a.m. in meetings, long meetings, debating to hear anybody tell me that democratic centralism is not democratic. I've had to hear the same thing said too many times because one person didn't understand it and needed to understand it before they can make a decision about it, to hear somebody tell me that democratic centralism is not democratic. Anybody that says that, again, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Please send them to us. We are not going to waste time with ignorance and nonsense. We have too much work to do. So if you don't know, there's no problem with that. We are here to help you know. But don't come here. I had a guy the other day, I have a shirt that says F patriarchy, F patriarchy. And I had it on because I was working out, and he stops. He said, what's that? What's that mean? I said, well, it's a system of institutionalized discrimination against women and marginalized genders. Oh, that's not a thing. That doesn't exist. I said, 5 seconds ago, you didn't even know what the hell it was. Now you're arguing with me about it. You're an expert about it. This is what happens in a bourgeois society, you all. This is what happens. And so that's why nobody knows anything. Everybody thinks they know everything. Nobody knows anything. And this is the reason why we're in the situation we're in. We have got to stop acting and behaving like this and just acknowledge that there's a lot we need to learn. I have Erykah Badu saying the African proverb, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. That's my life philosophy. There's so much I don't know. I make so many errors, but I'm going to continue to develop it. And we just have to approach life like that and understand it and stop trying to act like we know something because somebody abused us when we were a kid and we just can't fathom the fact of looking bad and being ignorant. We're ignorant. All of us are. Just accept it. Let's all stand up right now and say, I'm ignorant as hell and I want to correct the problem. Let's just do that. Just throw that yoke off your back. There's no reason to carry it. We got so much work to do and we don't know a damn thing, and we got to correct that so we can build the type of world that we need. I don't know what's wrong with that. I think that's exactly what we need to do. And so how does socialism look? How does it operate? You know, what is it about? So let's talk about that. Again, we said a common ideology of collective advancement based on moral incentives over material ones. Moral incentives over material ones. All of you listening to this right now understand that. Even if you don't realize you understand it, you do. And I'll give you an explanation as to why you do. Because you're participating in this program. You're not getting paid to do that. The only benefit you have for doing that is because you want to try to learn something so it can make you a better person. So hopefully you can make a contribution with that to make the world a better place. That's a moral incentive because you're basing your actions on a moral position. You want to do better. That's moral. You're incented because you have a moral perspective of how to proceed and walk through life. I have nothing but respect for you for that. And material incentives are you can't do anything unless you get paid for it, unless you get a material reward for it. That's what capitalism advances. You hear that all day, every day. I ain't doing nothing unless I'm getting paid. You hear that all day, every day in capitalism, but you don't believe it. You don't believe it. I don't care how often they say that to you. And I'll prove to you right now that you believe in moral incentives. And the reason why I want to prove this is because moral incentives are a key element of socialist construction. There's no material incentive when you're building a system for the people. It has to be moral incentive based. So I'm going to prove to you that you already agree with moral incentives, not just because you're here today, but deep down philosophically, you agree with it. And I'll prove it to you. If you had a terminal illness right now, and they told you you're going to have 3 months to live, you're going to die, and you had 2 doctors that you could speak to. First one told you, well, you got to pay me $500,000 certified money. I don't want no check because you people bounce checks. I need certified money or else I won't even consult with you. Second doctor tells you, look, I have a treatment plan I'm putting together for your terminal illness. I have all types of options we can try to get you better. Well, I don't have any money. Don't worry about that. The primary thing is getting you well. Now, which doctor are you going to choose? And you're a damn liar if you tell me, well, I would choose the first one. Anybody with any sense would choose the second one. That's because we recognize that someone motivated by moral incentives is operating on a higher level because they're doing it not because they're getting a reward, a personal reward for it, but because they believe in it. And when people believe in something and they're willing to put their life on the line for what they believe in, that is the highest level of humanity. We all know that. We know that when Dr. Martin Luther King was talking the night before he was assassinated on April 3rd, 1968, you all have heard what he said. At least you've heard some capitalist crunched up version of what he said. But he said, we are going to get to the mountaintop, paraphrasing him. We're all going to get there as a people. That's what he said. He said, I might not get there with you. Long life has its benefits. Everybody wants to live a long life. But the man knew that this system was hunting him to kill him. He was not confused about that. So he said that the night before he was killed. He said that. He said that if I don't make it with you, we're still going to make the promised land. And it wasn't even what he said. It was how he said it. You knew that there was nothing on earth that was going to stop that man from doing what he believed in. That's the highest level of humanity. And this backward capitalist system knew that. That's why they murdered him. That's the reason why they did it, because they knew they couldn't compromise. They couldn't make him sell out. They couldn't get him to do anything. When El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, when Malcolm X's house was bombed, February 14th, 1965, and he went and did a speaking engagement that same day. Most of us would have been so traumatized we couldn't speak for 6 months. He went and did a speaking engagement that same day and apologized, said, I'm sorry my clothes smell like smoke. But he was dedicated to work. And our enemies knew that. That's why they had to assassinate him. Now, most of us, they know, well, we ain't got to do all that. Just throw them a plate of fried fish and some greens and $5 and, they'll stop working. So they don't have to worry about a lot of us. But for people who are dedicated to what they believe in, that's moral incentive driving you as a human being, an essential element of socialist construction. And these are the components that have to exist in socialist construction. So if you don't have these things, it's not socialist construction. So understand these things so we can stop hearing ignorant things like, well, Britain's socialist, France is socialist, Canada's socialist. These are capitalist countries, you all. Capitalist, 100% capitalist. What they have are social welfare programs influenced by socialist development, because the people, whether they know it or not, including people in this backward country, demand socialist programs over everything else. Even if they don't know it, they demand it. So Europe and Canada produce these programs because they have to, because their people are much more militant than people here. Just, you just throw somebody twerking at them and they're done. They don't have any more fight in them. But over in other parts of the world, it's not that easy. So they have to acquiesce a bit, compromise a bit. So that's why they have that. But that still doesn't make them socialist countries. These are the elements that have to exist in order for a country to be socialist. There has to be absolutely free education. No student loans, no student debt, none of that nonsense. Education is free. Youth of the future, you prioritize educating them. You don't prioritize building no interballistic intercontinental ballistic missile over educating your children. Only a backward, primitive, caveman, cave person country like this one prioritizes building bombs like the neutron bomb that kills people and doesn't destroy buildings. That's the most primitive thing ever, and we pay for that. That's a whole different topic. But I'm saying my point is that absolutely free education, that's what has to exist in a socialist development. Also, absolutely free healthcare. Free healthcare. Not, well, I got healthcare, I got Obamacare. You know, thank God for Obama. Look, the bar is so low, they got you thinking that paying health insurance premium, look how crazy we are. Look how insane we are. They got us believing through Obamacare, what Obamacare did, or the Affordable Care Act, and the bar is so low that any crumb we get, we feel like we got to defend the Affordable Care Act because we didn't have that before. That's how low the bar is. I want free universal socialist health care. I don't want no damn Obamacare where 7 million people were signed up to pay health care premiums. That's what Obamacare did. You got health care now. And most of those healthcare companies were started from the transatlantic slave trade. And we are so dumb in 2022 that we look at that as progress. I mean, that is so, aliens land here 100 miles from now, they'll shake their head like, what the hell was wrong with those people? What were they thinking? And I'm not saying, I understand, like, if you don't have anything, something is better than nothing. And that's fine. Nobody's criticizing that. But we're talking about how do we solve the problems on Earth, not just get a little something better than nothing. We're talking about how do we get a vehicle to take us to the finish line, not where we can try to get a bus that'll take us 1/4 of the way. That's not what we're talking about right now. If we're just talking about how we can get 1/4 of the way, then we can talk about that bus, and we can talk about the Affordable Care Act, and that's fine. But we're not talking about that right now. So don't confuse the two. We're talking about how we get to the finish line. Absolutely free healthcare where you pay nothing for healthcare. Don't give us none of that nonsense about, well, how you gonna pay for it? Well, when your budget, 50% of your budget isn't going to military, you have the money to pay for it. You have the money. The reason why those other countries I mentioned can do that, the reason why socialist Cuba can do it, is because they don't spend 50% of their budget on the military like this backward country does. Guaranteed employment, that's the law, that you have to have an opportunity to have a job. That's not saying you give anybody anything. If someone just sits there, they don't do no work and they still get paid. Stop with that nonsense. Stop with that childish nonsense. Stop right now with that nonsense. This is saying that if you all know, if you go to inner city community and you set up a factory right now, there'd be people lined up around the block trying to get hired. Y'all know that. I remember I was doing some work for the party and I went to this building to get some tables a few years back, put them in my truck, and it was 8 o'clock, and it was the type of building where it had many tenants. It was 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday morning, and there were all these African youth, all these African and indigenous youth. I mean, I'm sure there was some European, but it was 99% African and indigenous youth in there, under 18 years old. All of them had dressed up in capitalist business attire. And I asked a couple of them, what is this? And it's a training to teach us how to sell knives door to door. Now, what kind of, anybody that says our youth don't want to work and they're up at 8 o'clock in the morning, dressed up to sell some damn knives door to door. I mean, clearly that's not the issue. Incentive to work is not the issue. So if you know that, then you know that, some of you don't know that. Youth lazy, because that's what the master told you to think. But we don't think through the master's talking points. We know our people because we work with our people, and we know our people want a better life. So guaranteeing employment is just simply saying all those who want to reach their highest potential, they have the opportunity to do that. They're not prohibited from doing that by white supremacy or patriarchy or homophobia or being physically challenged or any of these backward systems of oppression that dominate in this backward society. That's what that means, you all. Guaranteed employment, a critical feature of a socialist development. Guaranteed limits on wealth. And this is the part that is confusing, and that capitalists use to confuse you about socialism, because they will tell you, well, they control, you don't have rights in socialism. Well, yeah, you don't have rights to make millions of dollars exploiting people, especially when the only reason why you're in that position is because of the exploitation that's taken place over the last 530 years, put you in that position. You don't have the right to do that. So yeah, you have, in socialist societies, like in socialist Cuba, it's limited how much money you can make, and it should be. Because if you're on top of that society, it's because you belong to the privileged classes that existed under the Batista regime and the previous regimes before the Cuban Revolution. They didn't take your wealth. As far as I'm concerned, they should have took everything from you. You shouldn't have a damn thing. But they didn't do that. So now that you have that privilege, they're saying, okay, there's limits on how much more privilege you can have, because we're trying to create a society that's based on equity. And equity is not the same as equality. And if you don't know the difference, you need to find out. We're not going to explain that to you, but you don't have time for that. But it's based on equity. And so that's what it's about when we say that. Limited wealth in a society. Values of respect and dignity for all people are promoted. That's a part of the educational system. So in socialist Cuba, African culture is a part of the curriculum for their children. They learn that in school, whether they're African or not. They're not primitive like here. Well, it's critical race theory. Negroes saying this. Critical race theory. Somebody should walk up to them and pour a bucket of black paint over their heads when they talk like that. I don't know why we don't do that. If I saw somebody, you better believe they're being disrupted. If I'm anywhere and somebody's talking like that, there's going to be some damn disruptions happening. And I don't understand what the hell is wrong with the rest of us. We'll sit there and quietly and listen to that nonsense. I mean, you're a bigger slave than the one saying it. They're going to get some paint and splash it in their damn face for talking so much nonsense. But that's the opposite of what we're talking about right now. And I get it. Like, I know people here, they're like, well, he must be crazy. No, you're the one that's crazy. You the damn one you all went off your damn tree. It's not me. I'm living on the verge of understanding how to do a whole lot of great things because I'm not shackled by that slave mentality. You the one that's crazy. If you calling me crazy, you the one that's crazy. So values of respect and dignity for all people in society. They have LGBTQ education in Cuba, which is important. I'm not LGBTQ, but I'm educated, politically educated, revolutionary politically educated. So I know that any type of ideology that tries to diminish the existence of any human being serves our enemies. So that's what they do in Cuba. That's what has to happen in a socialist system. So let's do a quick comparable. As we get to the conclusion, socialist construction is about people over profit, right? And look at what socialist Cuba, for example, has done to illustrate that. During the COVID pandemic, they had 4 vaccines a year ago. Some of y'all you don't even know you don't even trust it. And you have just reason to be skeptical because this country, these corporations, they use people as guinea pigs, experiment on people to make money. So they don't do that there. Everybody got the vaccine. They got 100% vaccination in Cuba. People trust because they know the government is not going to do anything bad to them. They're trying to help them. And not only did they do that, that poor island nation took that vaccine to dozens of countries in Africa and Central and South America. How many countries did this backward country take? They couldn't even get a solution here. The richest country in the world couldn't even protect people here. Had over 1 million people here die. And it certainly didn't do anything to help anybody else around the world. And Cuba outperformed. They don't have anywhere near the resource because they've been exploited by capitalist countries. They have anywhere near the resources this country has and has done so much more to advance humanity during the COVID pandemic. That's just one. We can go on all day with the example. That's just one. That's just one example. The masses of people in the world want socialism, even if they don't know it. And you want socialism. And the way we can prove you want socialism is your mail gets delivered every day. And that's paid for through your taxes. That's a socialist concept. You don't go out every day to try to give the post carrier a check or a money order or cash and say, I don't want to pay tax. I just want to pay you this way. You don't do that. Before I said that, you never even thought of that. Just be honest. So that's proof positive right there that you think, okay, this concept is pretty good. That's what we're talking about. The fact that over 100 million people in the last 20 years have closed their corporate bank accounts and opened accounts with credit unions. That's because credit unions are local financial institutions that invest in services for the members. That's a socialist concept, you all. That's irrefutable. Multinational capitalist banks like Bank of America, Chase Bank, they started from slavery, and they invest in profit for the people that own the dominant shares in their corporation. So people are tired of that. That's why they charge you all those damn fees and everything. People are sick of that. So that's why they're switching to credit unions. So this is a socialist, this is a proof that people want socialist concept. Don't bring that nonsense to us, because we know what we're talking about. We know better. So how many countries dealt with COVID, and why has the US struggled so mightily? If you've been paying attention, we don't even have to get it. We don't even have to respond to that. It's clear why that happens. It's clear why that happens. And we talked about the credit unions and the banks. And just remember, people over profit. We can't tell you everything you need to know about socialism in 60 minutes. You have to dedicate yourself to engaging in a process of study to understand what that's about. All we want to do is hopefully inspire you to want to do that. That's all we can do in 60 minutes, is want to inspire you to do that. Want you to think, well, okay, I thought before now that socialism was a system, communism, these are systems where you don't have rights, everybody tells you what to do. I thought that, and I see now I have a lot more about it I need to learn, and I want to take steps to do that. That's what we hope to get out of today. And we hope that you can do that. And we hope that you will do that. And so we want to say that we are so appreciative that you stayed with us and participated in this program. The video will be available shortly after. We hope that you watch it again, spread it. We can give you, we hope you reach out. We can give you many books to read about socialism. If you want to understand socialist Cuba, there's a book, We Are Cuba by Helen Jaffe, Jaffe. There are many books, but that one is really comprehensive. It's a 500-page book, but it's really comprehensive, and it'll help you understand how the system works, and it'll do so in a way that cuts through the capitalist propaganda. So check that out. And next week, join us for Our Ancestors' Voices, October 2nd. We're going to be talking about understanding cryptocurrency. We're going to talk about cryptocurrency and the scam on oppressed communities. So you want to join us for that, go to the AAPRP Forward Ever shop, buy one of our clothing. I'm modeling one right there in the picture. You want to buy that. If you've already bought it, buy it again. You went to the supermarket 5 times this week. So I don't know how we think we're going to be free when we give our money to the enemy 5 times a week and we buy something from the revolution 6 months ago and then we're done forever. Like we have to have we have to have more dedication to the work taking place to liberate us than we do to our enemies. So please continue to support. The link is there. Go to aprp-intl.org and join the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. And if you don't want to join the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, join the Black Alliance for Peace, join the African People's Socialist Party, join the Nation of Islam, join the Malcolm X grassroots movement. I don't want to join none of them organizations. I don't like none of them. Then join the, I'm glad it's at the hour and he's going to shut up organization. Start that organization. And I'm glad he's going to shut up organization. You're going to need help. Reach out to us. We'll help you build your political education program for the I Wish He'd Shut Up, I'm glad the hour's up organization, because we have got to be organized. Nobody can sit this one out. You don't get to sit it out like you're watching TV. You got to be a part of this struggle. You got to be a part of this movement. And that's how you do it. Go to abetterworld.me. You can see all of these videos. They're housed there. This one will be up there no more than 30 minutes after we get done today. So check that out. Hoodcommunist.org is another wonderful site that gives you revolutionary Pan-African perspectives. So check that out, please. And again, last time today, donate to our project in Burkina Faso, the Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity. If you don't have a smartphone, so-called smartphone, the only thing makes it smart is they're stealing the coltan from the Congo. But if you don't have a smartphone, the link is there. The URL link is there on the screen. And if you have a smartphone, you can scan the QR code and please sponsor whatever you can. $5 a month, $10, $15, $20, $100 a month. We need it to keep our programs alive. All of our programs are on the bottom of the screen there, our AAPRP programs. Please support and check them out. And I ask you to continue to buy my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. It's available. Buy it. It's only $8 hard paperback, $5 digital. We use the proceeds to fund our revolutionary work. We appreciate each and every one of you. All of you that are here, join some organization working for justice. All of the white supremacists who constantly try to sabotage us, you should know by now that your efforts are fruitless. We cannot be denied, but y'all ain't got nothing better to do. So keep doing whatever the hell you think it is you're doing. You're not doing anything to stop us, and you never will. And please continue to support organizations fighting for justice. Have a great rest of your Sunday evening. Forward ever, backwards never. Always stay clever in any endeavor. Patriarchy is a backward system. It's got to go. Homophobia is backward. It's got to go. White supremacy has got to go. Capitalism, you already know it's got to go. Have a great rest of your Sunday evening.